All right there.
I'm going to struggle with my composure. This is season 3, episode 13 of Outdoor Gear Chat. I'm joined. I don't know what I'm joined today by, but in full character. I'm disappointed. We had some issues recording this last week. I'm disappointed you haven't got a flat cap, but I'm joined by in character Kathy.
Well, I am Kathy, owner and director of the Climber Shop and the Joe Brown shops in Snowdonia, and I thought I would surprise you, Wayne, as you did to me. To be fair, this is nothing compared to what you did to me when we recorded Gloves and Mittens back in the day, or back last year. You turned up in a wetsuit and a bright pink swimming cap. So I'm in my flat cap with my little tab in my mouth, and as an homage to Mr. Joe Brown himself.
And what's that dangling round your neck?
Oh, this is my golden nut.
Which we'll come back to.
Joe's golden nuts. He was very impressed with these. So yeah, we'll get onto that later on.
Brilliant. So this episode is we're going to be talking about the two shops, the brands that are involved in Joe Brown's and Climber Shop. Because tremendously historical, iconic brands, in the outdoor world. How are the two brands linked then? And I guess through yourself in many respects, isn't it? But
well, in modern times, my husband Paul and I bought the Joe Brown shops first, off of Val Brown, Joe's wife, and that was way back in 2005, and then the opportunity arose in 2010 to buy the Climber Shop in Ambleside as well. And this was something Paul and I had identified years and years ago, probably over 30 years ago, that what we would like to achieve is own or preserve the fantastic independent outdoor brands that we have in the UK and their link with the history of climbing as a sport, but preserve them in a way that they were sustainable. So actually having them as trade as their own entities, if you like, and maintain their identity and their names, but behind the scenes everything's streamlined. So all the websites, all the electronic stock systems, everything else, behind the scenes is all streamlined. So today we have it all sounds very posh, but we have a holding company called Hooked on Granite Limited, and that limited company allows us to trade as the Joe Brown shops in Snowdonia and the Climber Shop in Ambleside. What we didn't know, and this came out at a Joe Brown Christmas dinner back in 2012, we were sitting with Val and having a chat, and she was explaining that there was actually a link between the two shops even before that, and ironically, the Joe Brown shops wouldn't have existed without the Climber Shop. And I was sitting there eating our lovely Christmas dinner, and both Paul and I were like, "Oh, go on, tell us more." And Val was explaining that back in 1966, when they opened the first Joe Brown shops. Just prior to that, Joe was working as an instructor in the Peak District, an outdoor instructor. And Frank Davies and his wife, who had the Climber Shop, and that had been opened in 1959 by Frank, came to visit them. And as they drove off in their sparkly new sports car, Frank liked his cars, they were off on a holiday to France. And Val turned to Joe and said, "Well, how come they're off on a holiday to France in a fancy car and we're always sort of scratching around for the next money for your next expedition?" And Joe said, "Well, if you want to open a shop, we'll try." And that conversation literally within a matter of months led to the opening of the Clamberis Joe Brown shop.
Wow, that's awesome, isn't it? Yeah, that's amazing tale. And how did the Ambleside, if we stick with that chronologically time-wise, then how did the Ambleside shop come about then? What was that all about? Was Frank? Sorry, you just said then.
Frank Davies founded the Climber Shop, and he'd got into climbing. He'd become a member of the Rock and Ice Club, so he actually did know sort of Joe Brown prior, and got into his climbing, and he started getting really interested in kit, and dabbled a bit in selling some newfangled rubber climbing shoes, as they were at the time. And one of his first customers was a guy he climbed with in Wales called Chris Bonington. And Chris very kindly went through his old original diaries with me, just to go through the climbs that they did together, and told me then, it's like, yeah, I think I bought my first pair of rubber climbing shoes from Frank Davis.
No way. Oh, amazing.
Like, oh, wow, fantastic. So he had this interest in equipment, and he just hit the trade at the right time, because the outward bound was growing. Schools were starting to see the importance in outdoor learning, experiential learning in the outdoors, and it was really becoming, I suppose, people perhaps had a little bit more free time. People were getting their own transport as well. They were having to rely less on public transport, and climbing had the sort of this pulse of energy from the working class climbers coming through as well, Joe Brown's, Don Willans, and the people of their era. And he just hit the time right. Opened his shop in Ambleside, and as he did so, Joe worked as an advisor, a model, in fact. And Frank actually got in touch with a gentleman called Mike Parsons, who his family started the Carrymore brand.
Right. Yeah, so I recognise the name. Yeah.
Mike then went on to found OMM, which you'll recognise, which is obviously the running brand, specific running brand. And he went to the old original family shop and said, "Oh, here you make rucksacks," because of course Carrymore were renowned for their rucksacks in the 80s and 90s. And can you make one to this specification, to that specification? And that became the Joe Brown rucksack, and Mike worked with Joe to make sure it became just right. And there's quite a lot of different versions of that pack as it grew and it got improved over time. And in our Capel Keurig shop window, there's one a customer very generously gave to us, and that's on permanent display. And you can see it's the old canvas sack, and it's got the Joe Brown label on it, and well battered, well used, and well loved. And from that, getting that bespoke kit made, he became known to provide equipment for expeditions. He provided equipment for the English trip to Russian Pamirs, and Joe Brown was on that. That trip was actually led by Sir John Hunt, who obviously led the successful Everest expedition. So it was, what I found as I sort of delved back into the history was all these fantastic stories, and our shops between them have 119 years of combined mountaineering history, and they're just so intertwined. I suppose it's a very unique sport, and they're just so intertwined with the history of the sport. And when we had our 60th anniversary of the Climber Shop in 2019, I spent 2 years researching the history and put it into a document that's actually on our website now, that you can read the story chronologically almost.
And that's like you said, the 119 years doesn't describe all the huge events that the shops have then been involved in, and you just mentioned that, a brief bit about some of the kit that both shops played in, that sort of pioneering that outdoor equipment. But is there anything else on that sort of ilk that that's worthy of mention? Like Joe Brown with the packs, and Frank and the climbing shoes. Is there? More of that?
I mean, we're definitely equipment wise, with the Joe Brown helmets were iconic, and people, climbers of an age, will still go misty-eyed about having neck ache from wearing one of those all day because they weighed a ton. But my goodness, they were solid, and in fact they were tested before they went to market. It's a brilliant sort of urban myth within the company that the testing for the Joe Brown helmets was to drop a brick on one from the stairs leading up to the office in the Llanberis shop, put one on the floor underneath the stairs and just drop a brick on it. But I was assured by Val that there was a much more scientific process. They were actually sent to Farnborough for proper testing, as they should have been. And they actually remained at the top of their game as far as testing is concerned for a very, very long time. And I can remember going on like school trips and stuff, and I can still remember the smell actually, because they were all fiberglass, and the tape cradle inside. And I can remember wearing those.
The tape cradle inside, yeah. And that, I guess the locations of both those shops are just absolutely, at the heart of climbing as a sport as well in the UK, I guess. I'll offend the Scottish listeners. Sorry. within Wales and England, particularly, I'll rephrase that. And I guess great locations for those as well, aren't they?
Yeah, the national park locations are absolutely perfect, and of course they played a central part in both of the owners and the life of the shops. Really, Frank was very much involved in the Langdale Mountain Rescue Team in the early days, and just sort of talking about how they're interlinked with sort of local history. Frank, he was actually a rally driver, and his driving was renowned amongst his climbing friends, some of whom Chris Bonington in particular explained in no uncertain terms how scared he was once driving or as a passenger with Frank driving down the side of Thirlmere. But he was very well respected as a rally driver, and he actually drove the car, it was a Mini, for the very first Three Peaks record set in 1964 with a fell runner from Barrow called Peter Hall. And Frank drove so fast he got into the Guinness Book of Records, but then the law changed and speed limits were introduced, so he was then taken back out the Guinness Book of Records. I've seen letters from Norris McWhirter explaining why.
No way.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and again, actually, Frank's family very kindly let us use pictures of those letters on the big history page, so you can go on and you can see Norris McWhirter's letters to him. But Frank, he thought, even though Peter Hall was a very accomplished fell runner, he thought he could do it even faster, even with the new speed limits in place. Although I'm not entirely sure he stuck to those, to be fair. But he worked with another fell runner in 1971, the magnificent Joss Naylor. Now, Joss, I know, is a bit poorly at the moment, so we all want to say, everybody from the Climber Shop and Joe Brown's, a very big get well soon, Joss, and I'm sure, Wayne, you want to say the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we hope to see him back up and about soon. But Joss ran. Well, I went to visit Joss at his home in Wasdale and interview him to ask him about the event. And I've lived in Cumbria on and off now for about over 25 years. But I went to sat down and I was continually a sentence behind. His Cumbrian is so broad, it took me a good half hour to get my ear in, and I'm trying to make notes at the same time.
Well, in fairness, as a Cumbrian, I think he sometimes does it on purpose to just see if you're listening. And yeah, many times I'm like, what did you just say then, Joss? And he saw there's a gleam comes in his eyes, and so I wouldn't be too upset by that. But anyway, yeah.
Well, I like to think I passed the test.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, but it was smashing. And another one of those, moments is right up there with, sitting with Chris Bonington in his office and going through his diaries, sitting with Joe and Val in their kitchen and talking about Joe's expeditions, and sitting with Doug Scott in his office and just those little moments in your life when you meet someone, your idol, and you're just like, oh my God, this is actually happening. But it did take a while. But honestly, Joss, he was in his early 80s at the time, and he recounted the whole day as if, I'm sure he probably does a lot of talks, but it was in real time. I felt like I was there. And I'm like, so wait a minute, Joss, can I just go back and understand? You only really had a Mars bar to eat the whole time. Oh yeah. Again, I've done a transcript in the history, and it was such an honor, and an experience to hear that story firsthand. But when you read through the speed that he's running, the time that he takes to cover the terrain that he's moving over, it's just astonishing. Absolutely
it really
astonishing.
Yeah, and like you say, it'll be half a Mars bar and a sip of water from a stream, isn't it? That's the thing. It's like, there's no electrolytes or gels or anything like that. It was like maybe a boiled sweet. Just it was the old favourite.
The thought of a boiled sweet was enough to get him to the top of Ben Nevis in some horrendously short amount of time,
Absolutely, yeah, it's remarkable, and that is the link between Joss and the sort of
Joss and the shops. Frank drove the car for him on his 3 Peaks, but Frank actually was also involved in the 3 Peaks yacht race because he was a sailor as well.
All right,
and he actually won in 1978 because and the reason why it's broadly accepted is he was the first yacht captain to crew runners. Most of them crewed either fell walkers or sailing crew that could walk the distance. And in 1978 he worked with runners. There was Ken Ledward was one of them. The name escapes me. Again, it's all in the big history there. And he, because of his runners were endurance runners, he opted to stop at to take port at Whitehaven because his runners could cope with the 40 miles to the top of Skidder and back, as opposed to going into Ravenglass as the other sailors captains had chosen to do. So he had a couple of 3 Peaks records to his name that he was part of, Mr. Davies.
That's phenomenal, isn't it? Well, yeah, like that. Again, those links to different sports as well, just not just the sport of climbing, I guess. And did Joe work in the shops? Was Joe switching back to Joe Brown's again? Did Joe actually?
Business was very much run by Val. Now, Val, she's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and I always learn something new. When I have a phone call with her, always come off the phone having learned something new. But she did it. She was a climber in her own right before she met Joe, back in the this is in the 50s. So it was quite rare, really. She's got the bus up to Langdale and found people to climb with. She was recounting a story where she was in the old Dungeon Gill, and somebody came up to her and said, "Oh, that's Joe Brown over in the corner," and she was like, "Well, it's of no consequence to me at the time, This is so brilliant." So she did actually manage the business and ran the business right up to when we bought it for her. It was wholly in her name. Joe certainly did work in the shops, and people would, he'd serve folks and it'd be like, "Oh yeah, we'll go climbing afterwards." We've still got customers coming in telling us stories like that. But his role essentially, he was a builder, and he also was on expedition a lot, and he also did quite a bit of film work. Actually, he actually was a stunt double for Robert De Niro in The Mission.
No. Fantastic.
I know. And of course he had his own television career as well. He did Fishing the Hard Way.
Right.
So very, very busy, but the Joe Brown shops themselves, even though it's his name over the door, it was very much Val's business that she nurtured and grew, that we bought from her.
Right. So basically, she did all the graft and he did loads of messing around. Is that fair to say? It's interesting. I was listening.
I'm not going to get drawn into that.
No. I didn't mean that, please. I really didn't mean it. But it's an interesting point. I was watching some of the films from I think it was the Montaigne session at the Kendal Mountain Festival, just this year, just gone in 2021. And there was a bunch of there was a panel of I think 4 or 5 athletes that were on there, male female mix. I think there was a couple of blokes and three ladies that were on there, climbers, but basically saying, we spend our entire year fundraising to go on these expeditions, and that that's all working towards that. And it's sort of there's a bunch of that's being described for me in what you've just said as well, isn't it? With both Joe and Frank, there is they've got the passion, and they're sort of like, well, how do I link my passion to actually making an income in some way, shape or form? And
and I think that kind of ethos, if you like, we knew that Val had turned down a lot of prospective buyers before we spoke to her. And we were very good friends with her long-term manager at the time. And the reason that we were able to buy them without realizing at the time we were being interviewed, we got invited round to Val and Joe's house, and Paul and I going up to the door like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Joe Brown's house. And we went in and met Val, and she was lovely, and she said, oh, Joe's not here at the moment, and we tried very hard not to like physically slump at the fact that, oh, we're not going to meet him, but she said, no, do come in. And we had some lunch together, and partway through she explained that Joe had made the soup, and shortly after that she had to leave the room to go and take a phone call, and both Paul and I, like little kids at the table with our soup spoons, like, we're in Joe Brown's house eating Joe's soup. I mean, how cool is it? It's such a moment. Brilliant. And then, of course, she came back in the room, and we were calm, we were composed, we discussed business.
Well, it's just a great example, isn't it, of how your idols are just normal human beings, and in all sorts of ways, aren't they? Yeah.
But that sense of combining your passion with how you earn your living, it's very central to mine and Paul's ethos. And we've certainly, the reason we work is to take our kids on adventures, to climb more, to bike more, to run more, to do more of what we love. The last 2 years have made that a little bit of a skew. They've shifted that balance the wrong way, but it's coming back. And but that is fundamental to the way we run our lives, and without realizing, as we sort of talked about that, that really helps sway Val's decision to allow us to buy her company, because she'd poured her life into that. It wasn't just a contract of ink and paper. It was we were taking something on, and very much the same with the climbers shop. Frank poured his life and soul into that and created something. In doing so, he's created something a lot more than just a shop as well, and I'll touch on that in a minute with the El Rio Foundation. But it's so important to be able to marry your passion with what you do. You spend so much of your time working, you may as well enjoy it. And,
well, it's funny. I think it was a conversation that I had with Charlie Sprosen from Mountain Run a few years ago. Actually, we were just being philosophical, nearly struggling with it, being all philosophical about jobs and stuff. And I was employed in heavy engineering at the time, doing HR work. And he just said to me, he'd been to something that had changed his life, and it was do what you love as often as you can. And that sort of switched my mentality around work, really, and has ultimately led to you and I talking about this now, really, in a weird way. Is that that be wanting to spend more time outdoors, initially running, but just being outdoors actually has led to a complete shift in how I generate income, for want of a better phrase, being mercenary about it. But
and that's something that I hope, and I'm sure it does come across in our shops, because a lot of our staff have made that decision as well. They've chosen to move to the national park to take a change in their job, to just do what they love. And most of our staff are way more qualified than Paul and I. Well, I think we are probably the least qualified people in our business. We've got folks with degrees and PhDs and masters and all sorts of stuff, but it's when you make that decision, it can feel like a bold decision to make, and depending on your circumstances, it can be a very, very bold decision to make. But I haven't actually met anybody who's made that decision and regretted it.
No, well, exactly, because you do just get to spend more time outdoors doing what you love, don't you?
Definitely.
So yes, and it's just intriguing to me about you keeping the brands separate as well, the shop names, and having those very, 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 whilst you own those, essentially, they are very specific, aren't they? And Yeah, is that
Yes.
is that because of the legacy, for want of a better phrase? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it can sound a bit of a cliche, but we do really, Paul and I both see ourselves as custodians. We're the current owners of two fantastic brands, and customers have got amazing memories of coming up. And if you go to the Snowdonia, you go to the Joe Brown shops. It's actually, there's a paragraph in a book by Al Alvarez called Feeding the Rat, just describing the shop and the whole process of going to Llanberis and pottering about on the slate floors, and it's really, he's a fantastic writer and it's very evocative. And certainly when I started out, if you went somewhere climbing, there was always at some point some gash weather and some downtime, and the first thing you did is you went and poked around a gear shop.
Yeah.
that's what you do. So the Joe Brown's name is synonymous with Snowdonia. The Climbers shop is synonymous with Ambleside, and we didn't want to remake the wheel. Fundamentally, both of us hate doing work that doesn't need to be done. All that hard work and all those solid foundations have been put in place, and what better way to continue their legacy than to continue the shops in the vein in which they were started.
And I know there's been some forays into climber shops elsewhere and so on, but it's always had the two linchpins have been maintained, really, haven't they? So
I was just going to say, businesses, they ebb, they flow, just like a tide. You make decisions, some work, some don't. Sometimes world events come along, we get flooded, we get a global pandemic. You got to adapt, haven't you? Better for worse.
And I think being philosophical, if it weren't for the pandemic, we wouldn't be sat here now chatting about stuff.
We wouldn't.
It was you'd said yourself, it was something that you'd sort of been thinking of doing podcasts before, but actually it's kicked off during the pandemic, hasn't it? But you mentioned earlier about Frank and some of his sort of charitable work. Is that fair to say? Was that right?
Yeah, it is, because Frank had the foresight in the 80s to he bought the building in Ambleside that our shop trades out of, and he had turned that over to the Frank Davies Trust. Now that's actually now known as the El Rio Foundation, and Frank's wife and son are very much involved in maintaining the ideals of the foundation, and that's for the prevention of poverty, the advancement of education, and to promote life-saving health improvement. And that means that all the rent from our shop in Ambleside is put into the foundation, and they go on to support charities like Water Aid and, for us most specifically, Community Action Nepal. So if you come into our Ambleside shop, you'll find we've probably got prayer flags for sale. We've got, I've just got to go and pick some more up actually, because we just sold the last one, but we've got signed prints taken by Doug Scott, and they've signed from all manner of different climbers. So they'll be signed by Doug, some are signed by Joe, some are signed by Chris Bonington, some are signed by Reinhold Messner. So they're utterly unique, and we have those on display in our stairwell, and every single penny from those goes directly back to the charity.
Wow, that's phenomenal. Yeah. But it's just phenomenal that that's set up that way, isn't it? And I know you're having done the podcast with you and so on, and carrying on from the conversation we were just having, in some respects, your attitude, particularly to environment and sustainability, is huge as well, isn't it? It's something that's really important to you as well, as so that's projecting that legacy, if you will, forward.
Yeah, it's extremely important, not least because we all love going out into the outdoors, and that means we have a responsibility to make sure that it's still there for our future generations to enjoy in the way that we see it now. It needs protecting. There's more evidence than you can dispute that it needs protecting. So we do have an environmental policy, for want of a better word. It's probably quite a big one. I like to think we make a big impact for a small company, because it's Paul and I that can make the final decisions. Each staff review we have every year, we ask our staff, for their input as well. If they come up with ideas, we implement them. We've got various items that we sell that money goes back to the Snowdonia Society and the Lake District Foundation. And coupled with that, one thing that we do feel is utterly interlinked is social sustainability as well. It's not just about the environment, it's about social sustainability as well. So it's about giving back, maybe introducing more people to the environment. Obviously, there's been a huge influx of people into the environment, outdoor environment over the last few years, but introducing people to it safely, new people to it safely and responsibly as well. So each year we do publish a little sustainability update about what we've been doing, and we try to make that as real as possible. We're not paying a company somewhere to pay another company to possibly plant some trees on our behalf. It's about, right, how can we have a direct impact? We can raise money to pay rangers in the Lake District to rebuild footpaths. That's a direct impact. That's positive. We've got obviously our direct impact with our rent going back to Community Action Nepal, building hospitals and clinics for Sherpa families in Nepal, which is obviously Doug's legacy and very important. And then trickling right down to grassroots level. So maybe we can help somebody with equipment who's doing a particular expedition that just benefits more than the people just climbing the summit, if you like. To get our attention, it needs to be doing a lot more than just someone going out and effectively going on holiday. It needs to have a social impact, it needs to have an environmental impact, and if we all do a little bit, that trickles out and suddenly we're having a big effect.
Yeah, the ripples. Sorry, changing gear completely. I'm just quite conscious of time. It's but yeah, the golden nut. You need to tell about the hunt for Joe's golden nuts.
Oh yeah, when I explain my idea, I am quite famous within our company for coming up with just outlandish ideas. And actually,
not just within your company, not just within your company. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. What were you saying while I talked over you then? Yeah.
yeah. Often I'll say my ideas, and there's a face palm from my husband, like, okay, if you need to do that, you go ahead. And this was one of those ideas, and it was to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Joe Brown shops. And I just thought, I don't want to do like another competition online where people just like the answers there, all you have to do is click. I want to do something different. I want to get people engaged, and let's use climbing gear. GMM will make us some special golden torque nuts. We'll get 50 of those made. Let's go and hide them on climbs. And then like Paul, my husband, who's obviously very sensible, was like, well, you can't put them on the climb because we've got like some major safety issues or liability issues with people falling off trying to get them. I was like, right, okay, yeah, no, that's not going to work. I know, let's hide them at the top or the bottom of the climb, but we won't say where. We'll publish the list and we'll say during the summer, you've got to hunt and find. We'll give clues, but you've got to go and hunt and find it. So we hid 50 and all of them were found, and folks just totally got in on it. It was great. But Paul did say, you do need to tell Joe what you're doing. You do need to have him sign off on this. I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I went to go and see Val and Joe at home, and I said, I left it till the end. I was sort of going out the door.
Oh, by the way,
why have I put myself in this situation, Joe? I've got an idea for a competition, with your permission. And I explained the competition. I said, I want to give it a unique name. He's like, go on. I said, I want to call it the Hunt for Joe's Golden Nuts. And he just guffawed. He threw his head back and guffawed. And he just sort of looked at me and said, well, I better go and get myself ready then.
What, to have spray painted nuts? Was that?
Yeah, I think that's where he was going. I did leave the conversation there.
Yeah, that's it. And now I'm off. Yeah, brilliant.
So we had folks posting their pictures online when they found them, and we had pictures of people in yoga poses with their golden nut dangling off their ankle, and pictures of dogs with them around their neck, and it was really good fun, and actually it went so well. We redid a version of it for the 60th anniversary for the Climbers Shop, and we had Nuts of Legend. So we had 60 blue nuts hidden around the Lake District, and did exactly the same thing, and that was great fun too. But we did receive one particular image that we had to delete from the company system.
Oh no.
Of an inappropriately placed nut.
Yeah. And moving on. Yeah. That's we'll leave that one.
It was
there.
inevitable, really,
Yeah.
wasn't it? It was,
well,
it was amazing.
Absolutely.
It took that long.
Yeah,
Credit
yeah.
to our customers, it took that long.
Well, yeah, or disappointingly in some respects, yeah. So what's next then? What's next for the Climbers Shop and Joe Brown? So
yeah. Well, we will be reigniting our expedition events now that we can welcome people into the shops in England and hopefully shortly Wales, with reduced or next to no restrictions. And our expedition events are essentially over a weekend, where we'll have British mountain guides on hand, we'll have reps on hand, we'll have staff members who've been to all different countries around the world. If people are planning, folks have had 2 years to plan their bucket list, so they're gagging to get away and do amazing trips, and we want to hear about those. Come in. We are expedition specialists for RAB and for mountain equipment, so we hold in stock their entire expedition range. We don't have it on display all the time, mostly because people come in and like, oh wow, look at that jacket, and they touch it and they unzip it, and suddenly by the end of the season it's gone a really bad colour.
Yeah. Oh, the zip's missing. Yeah, the zip's missing.
They're so gorgeous and puffy. You just want to touch them. They're so tactile. But actually, we just don't have the space for that much goose down on display. But we have the opportunity for people to try on high altitude equipment if they're going on trips before they buy. You can choose. You can find the right size for you. Footwear. We have an unparalleled high altitude footwear range where you can try any size you need. If it's made in the size, we'll have it for Scarpa and for La Sportiva and for Boreal. So and we'll have experts on hand to talk through all of that, and we'll also have talks in the evening by some very, very special guests, not to be missed. So that will be happening probably, and I'm hoping, I'm just going to keep an eye on the restrictions, out of Capel Curig in the autumn, with dates to be arranged.
Right. Okay. Awesome. I thought I'd missed that. I was just going to ask that question. When is it? Yeah. Sounds amazing.
I haven't got that far yet.
Yeah. No. And then thinking, the year ahead as well. Of course, we've got alongside Brave, the Climbers Shop have got the trail races this year.
Yeah. Oh, nicely done. I forgot about that. Yeah. Our Ambleside 25 and 50 trail event. If you're thinking of trying the trail event, the 25K is fantastic. Wayne will be there to cheer you over the finish line, and then if you're up in your distance, then the 50K, the views will just be fantastic. And of course, it's to support all the amazing work that Braith do with young people and mental health with young people as well from disadvantaged backgrounds. So if you want to feel good about yourself in 2022, and you love trail running, then get yourself entered.
Well, if you just love running, to be honest, it's amazing how many conversations I've had recently with people that don't know how to trail run. You're like, we're very privileged that we just go off and do stuff. But it was at the National Running Show in Birmingham, and so many people going, they just don't know. They don't know what to do, how to do it, what they need, and all the rest of it. Rather than, we just crack on and do it, wouldn't we? So yeah, just a couple minutes left of this one. What's how are we signing off? Was there on the history of Climbers Shop and Joe Brown?
Well, I think last year we had the 55th anniversary of the Joe Brown's shops, and that had to be celebrated digitally. So we launched the Joe Brown Outdoor Academy website, which is a wealth of knowledge. So there's loads of information on there about products that we can't fit on our product descriptions, if you like, on our web shop. And also on there, you can go online and find a local instructor to Snowdonia and to the Lake District. And there's loads of skills tips as well. There's videos, there's articles, and there's links to specific skill courses, if you like, for want of a better word. So if somebody's looking to get into trail running, there's links to companies, small individual local companies that can really, really help you and get you engaged in a new sport.
Brilliant. And that, yeah, sorry, did you say the web address on that? But they're on
Yeah,
the,
that's
on the website.
www.joebrownoutdooracademy.com. And that's literally just, we pulled that together in the 2021 winter lockdown, and we've started with a website. It's there. We were fortunate to get government help as a retailer during the lockdown. A lot of the small independent self-employed instructors that we work with and have supported us by bringing their clients into our shops over the years didn't get that help. So this is a platform, for them to advertise on for free, and it puts customers in touch with credible people that we know they're going to have a great experience with, who are brilliantly qualified, and actually, because outdoor qualifications can be a bit of a minefield to understand who's qualified to take you to do what, there is actually a chart on there as well explaining who is qualified to take you out in what conditions, what time of year, what part of the world.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's been Outdoor Gear Chat. I've been Wayne, and this has been Kathy.
Yeah, thank you.